Welcome to another case study by Axial Capital Partners, where in this video, we'll look at the development finance structured for a client to acquire a piece of land and develop 9 new houses when his own capital was locked up in a recently completed project. The video will look at the scenario faced by that client who had completed a development of 5 houses and had just released them on the sales market and wanted to acquire a piece of land he'd identified to commence another development of 9 new build houses. But he was faced with a problem familiar to many property developers. His capital was tied up in the recently completed project, and his ability to purchase a new site and commence the new build was therefore constrained. In order to allow him to secure the new piece of land and to commence with the next project whilst he waited to recover money from the sale of those recently completed houses, we structured a cross-collateralized facility to release his equity from that last project, plus fund the costs on the new project. Combined, this facility was good enough to meet all acquisition and development costs for the new project, meaning the client could leverage even more value out of his own capital. Essentially, this facility provided 100% of the funds that the client required to get started on that next project. And as he had adequate security across both development sites, we could use suitable debt finance that avoided the client having to enter into a profit share arrangement. As each house in the recent project was sold, the money could be used to pay down a portion of that facility and release a charge over the completed development so he could move on to getting the next project off the ground. So we'll look at 3 elements in this video, one being an overview of the property in the case study itself, which as we've said is 9 houses. This comprises 4 detached houses and 5 terraced and semi-detached. Secondly, we'll look at the key numbers and the margins in what is a fairly highly leveraged facility. And finally, the returns that the developer can expect to achieve from this project. So firstly, looking at the overall site plan, we see the 4 detached houses that we mentioned as in this scheme, plus the 5 other properties being a pair of semi-detached and a run of 3 terraces. So looking at the elevations, those are the 4 detached, and there we see the elevations of the 2 semi and the 3 terraced houses, with one of the detached to the left. So looking at the numbers involved in this project, first we take the GDV, or the sales value that was determined by the developer when the project is completed. We also run appraisals to make sure these numbers stack up, and we work our numbers backwards to make sure the project will work. So here it applied an end value of 2.455 million. When we're looking at 9 houses in this scheme, that comes to an average of 272,000 per property. There are, of course, sales legals and agents' fees involved in selling the houses on, which gives us a net development value of just over £2.4 million. For him to acquire the new site to develop the new houses, there was a purchase cost of £650,000. In this case, there was no CIL or Section 106 affordable involved, but of course there's stamp duty and there are legals involved in acquiring the site. So those fees totaled comes to just under £700,000 for acquisition costs for the new site. Then we look at the construction costs. We start off with a figure for the main build, for the main construction, which in this case was £990,000 according to the developer's cash flow for the overall project. There were groundworks and services to be run into the development site. Those totaled £100,000. There are generally professional fees, architectural, etc. to be attached to such projects. In this case, the developer had factored these into his overall cash flow and his overall £990,000. We applied a 5% contingency to this to be sure, and that came out to overall construction costs of £1.14 million. In terms of the finance costs on this project, bearing in mind that the developer didn't have cash, so we therefore needed essentially 2 separate facilities, one for the development of the new site, and the other being a facility to release the equity that he had in his recently completed project. He had a small amount of debt sitting on that recent project, but there was equity that we could pull out of it as well. So we'll call this facilities 1 and 2 for simplicity. On facility 1, the development facility, we had an agreed 7.5%. Now, over the 14-month development term, that equates to 8.75% on all of that money. In this case, it equates to a full figure of £160,000. Now, that would be the peak interest charge. In reality, as a development is phased, there are tranche drawdowns, that interest figure would be slightly lower than that. Now, this facility attracted a 1% arrangement and 1% exit, which is also added to the total amount. Facility 2, a game where we want to extract the equity out of his recently completed project of 5 houses, that also attracted a rate of 7.5% and a 1% arrangement fee. In this case, crucially, there's no exit fee, which is what makes that facility particularly flexible. As and when each of those 5 houses is sold, that facility can be paid down until it's completely paid off without any penalty or without any exit fee attached to it. Now we can see that no interest charge has appeared here. The reason for that is what we've done with that facility is essentially extracted equity that will go towards the new development project. So if we put that in here as essentially his equity contribution to the new development of 9 houses, in this case, we managed to pay down the outstanding debt on the recent project and extract 600,000 of equity. When we apply that figure, it drops the development facility down to essentially a 67% loan to cost, which is in the end a very good level of leverage. Now the interest figures appear, and that gives us in the end an indicative overall interest charge of 191,000. Again, this is a peak figure, and in reality, with the tranche drawdowns on the new development, we would expect that figure to be lower than that as long as the project runs to time schedule and runs to budget. So with our total interest charge and our total anticipated acquisition and development costs, we come to a figure of just over £2 million. Now that leaves, against the GDV, a profit of £390,000. That's net profit for the developer. Considering he's not put any cash in at all, that's a net return on total costs after finance of over 19%. In the end, that developer did really quite well out of a project where he had no money to go into it. So if we look now at a very brief summary of that, the overall project value, the NGDV, was anticipated on the new build of 9 houses at £2.455 million, just under £2.5 million. The total development costs, so acquisition and build pre-finance, was just over £1.8 million. Now, the finance model that we structured for this client was to use collateral from his previous development to achieve 100% finance for the new project. In the end, that meant that the cash the developer put in was essentially zero. He was using collateral from that previous development. There was no money going in. And from that, he managed to achieve a net profit of just under £390,000, which is based on the maximum interest charge of 191, which in reality we would expect to be lower, therefore achieving a higher net profit. So thanks for watching, and if you'd like to speak with us further about any of your projects, please do contact us via our website axialcapital.co.uk or give us a call. Thank you for watching.